Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Prognard. I am your host, Jacob Williams, and today, by viewer request, I'm going to be breaking down some Imperial strategies for Star Wars Rebellion. Probably my absolutely favorite game from last year, but if you're a longtime subscriber to the channel, you already know that, given all my other videos on it. But this one was requested by a viewer, so basically what they wanted to know is what are some just general Imperial strategies that I guess maybe new or intermediate players can use to get some wins on the Rebels. Before we begin shooting, I gotta stop ordering these cheap ass cell phone mounts for my tripod because it looks like I lost another one and it seems to be holding for right this second. Let's see if it'll last through the whole video. Hopefully I won't have to go to handheld and go back to when I first started the channel and everything was shaky like a British nanny. But let's go ahead and get started. So I've been trying to go back to more of how I did things in the beginning, like when I did my Cuba Libre videos, and actually have some notes typed up on what I want to talk about. So hopefully things will be a little bit smoother. So let's go ahead and get started. So the way I like to think about it is that there's two basic Imperial strategies. And that's kind of what I've got set up over here. There's basically two strategies you can do. And realistically, in most games, you're going to do kind of a mix, but your strategy is going to lead one way or the other. All right, so maybe think of it like you'll be doing like 51% of one and then 49% of the other. I mean, very rarely are you going to go 100-0 or 100-0 and that sort of thing. So keep that in mind that you're going to blend these, but I'm going to tend to speak of them in absolutes. But like I said, most times you're going to do a mix. So the two basic strategies you can go with. Over here I have cards representing what I like to call the seek and destroy strategy. And the basic idea behind this strategy is you're just going to vomit as much plastic all over this board as possible. And you're going to try to find the rebel base by moving into systems, landing a ground troop, and seeing if it's there. Just sweeping different places, very typical counterinsurgency like tactics. All right. And then over here, what this represents is what I like to call capture and torture. All right. Now, to be clear, when I say capture and torture, that's just kind of a catch-all way of saying you're going to capture leaders and then you're going to use some other card to follow up on the captured leader to get some sort of intelligence. All right. So what I'm going to do is just go down talking about the seek and destroy method and the capture and torture method. And that's how I'm going to break up this video here. All right, so let's talk about the search and destroy. I already said the basic idea is to vomit plastic everywhere and find the base using, counterinsurgent sweeping type tactics. The pros of this strategy is that this can be done regardless of what your opening hand looks like, okay? So it's a very consistent strategy. And another pro is during the late game, because you're getting pieces all over the board, the rebels are going to have fewer chances to retreat their base if they get caught. Now, some of the cons of this strategy is that your actions are going to be super precious. I mean, most times... Oh, and I lost my pointer there. Most times your actions are going to be really limited anyway. And if you're doing this seek and destroy method, your action economy has to be even more tight than it would be normally. All right, so that's kind of a con. And then a lot of times your forces are going to be thinned out, which means you're going to be subjected to some of the guerrilla tactics that the rebels are going to use. For example, like you might leave a lone Star Destroyer in a system, and then the rebels ambush it, and then they get one of their objectives. So those are some of the pros and cons of the Seek and Destroy. Let me see if I can move the tripod a smidge. Hopefully the cell phone won't fall. Very nice. All right. Let's zoom here. And let's take a look at some of the key mission cards that you're going to be using in this strategy. Let's see if I can step back for a minute. All right, and I kind of have these in alphabetical order here. But the common theme you're going to sense with these mission cards and why they're important is that they're either going to, A, get you more plastic on the board, or B, they're going to change control of a system. All right, so if you don't know, or if you don't remember from the rules, let's say you have no units in Mon Calamari, okay, and neither does the rebels, and it's a neutral planet. If you flip that to Imperial Loyal and the base is there, your opponent has to tell you it's there. Okay, so most of these missions are either going to get you more units on the build queue, or they're going to let you flip loyalty so that you'll know if the base is there or not. All right, so let me just kind of go down here. Sorry that I don't want to try and zoom in too much, but the first key card is Address Delays. Again, this is going to be one that's going to get you plastic on the board. I don't know if I need to read all these out. I'm not going to read them out for the sake of time and carefulness of my tripod. This is going to let you get more plastic on the board. Display of Power. This is a great one for flipping a system to Imperial Loyal. Once again, this is a way to figure out where the base is without having to actually have units there. Double Our Efforts is going to let you get capital ships out there faster. And when you're with the Seek and Destroy method, when you're eyeing planets to look out for, you really need ones that are either going to have the blue square or the blue circle, like, I guess it's not in frame, but here on Ord Mantell. Because those are going to give you your Star Destroyers and your assault shuttles, which you'll need to transport troops around. So Double Our Efforts is going to be a good way to get more of those on the build queue. And they're going to get there faster. Let's see here. Choose 1 or 2 units on the space, 2 or 3 of the build queue. Oh, sorry. This isn't going to get you a ship onto the build queue. It's going to let you move your build queue down faster. All right. Fear will keep them in line is another critical one. What's good about this is if you use it with Tarkin, you start with 2 successes automatically. If you're successful, you're going to gain 2, one loyalty in 2 different systems. So that's a good way to really maximize your action economy. Flipping 2 with 1 action is amazing. This is like taking 2 fear. What's that card called? The basic one that you have in your hand from the start of the turn. Oh, Rule by Fear. It's like doing a 2 Rule by Fears in 1 action, which is nice. Planetary Conquest. This is an amazing card, okay? Not only if you use it with Veers, you're going to get 2 successes, but what this is going to let you do is, let's say you have a bunch of stuff on Mon Calamari, but you don't have any capitals. You get to teleport them to, say, like Yavin 4, and if the base is there, well, you've already got heavy firepower to begin your assault. I have almost lost a couple of games due to a surprise planetary conquest, so very important. Trade negotiations. just good for getting more loyalty, as I talked about. One of the things I should have mentioned with display of power is that it's going to gain you 2 loyalty in a system. So you can flip it, straight from Rebel control to Imperial, or sorry, Rebel loyal to Imperial loyal in one action. So again, that's almost like 2 rule by fear actions in one go. Another good one is research and development. Now, here's the thing with research and development. You don't have the actions to do projects, okay? In general, whether it's the seek and destroy and the capture torture strategy, you really just don't have the actions to do projects, generally speaking. So the main reason why this is a critical card is that this can be used to remove sabotage, which is a card that the rebels always have in their hand because it's a starting card, and it can really shut down your production. And sometimes it's not even the production being shut down that hurts. It's not being able to deploy units to a sabotage system, which really sucks. So this is a good one to have keyed up. And a lot of Imperial players, play this as their first action no matter what. So that way, if someone does a sabotage, they're right here to remove the sabotage. Now, if your rebel opponent is smart, they're going to do the sabotage on a subjugated system. Now, you have to keep in mind that research and development only works on Imperial loyal systems. All right, I think that's a big misplay a lot of new people make. But so a lot of times, so if someone has sabotaged Mon Calamari, or let's say you've let me back up. Let's say you've subjugated Mon Calamari, you need to hurry up and get it flipped Imperial loyal, so that way, if it is sabotage, you can use research and development. And you will get one card or one project card off of that, but I think that the only project cards that are worth doing here is the Construct Factory. This is going to let you basically get a free build out of one system, which is good. Oversee project. This is great because it's going to let you take stuff off of the build queue prematurely and get it out on the table. And then Super Laser Online. Now, Super Laser Online is in both strategies as a key project card. But these days, the Death Star is a liability in my way of thinking. And the only reason why you should be blowing up planets is if you find the Rebel base and it's heavily fortified. So you just want to get in there with the Death Star and super laser it. So that way you can end the game. So that's kind of my current thoughts on Super Laser Online. All right. Now, some of the key leaders for this strategy. You're going to have Admiral Ozzel. I think he's key. And the reason why he's key is he has this logistics symbol. And look, a lot of your key cards here key off of logistics. Now, is logistics super important? I don't know. You start with General Tag, who has a logistics. And you start with Grand Moff Tarkin, who already has a logistics. So is more logistics needed? Probably not, because you have all of your cards only require one logistics symbol. And most of them are resolves, so I don't know. How critical is it? But if you feel like you need logistics just so you can have a wide variety of options, Moff Gerard also has it. Of these two, I think Ozzel's a little bit better. Intelligence is a little more use. Well, I don't know. He could flex on. There's a lot of diplomacy out here, so maybe Moff Gerard would be better. So those are some two leaders that I think are fairly key to this strategy. Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader, you can't forget about these guys. Um, they just have all that diplomacy. They're your most diplomatic guys here. Vader also has that spec ops if you need to do planetary conquest if you don't get General Veers. And then both of them just have excellent combat cards or tactics cards. So these are going to be key players. Now, I know Janus Grijatis has the diplomacy, but here's kind of the breakdown. I'm showing these leaders off not because they're critical leaders, but you really need to be aware if you recruit these guys. I know a lot of people are going to be tempted to recruit Boba Fett because they think he's cool, which, as a side note, I don't know where that comes from. He sucks in the movies. He follows some trash, which is why he finds Han, but he doesn't even bring Han in by himself. Vader really captures him. So he's basically just a delivery boy, and in the end, he gets his ass kicked by a blind Han Solo. So I don't know why people think Boba Fett's so badass, but they do. And I guess in this game, he is. But both of these guys don't have tactics symbols, okay? So this means they cannot command fleets. And this strategy is all about commanding fleets. So you really got to be careful if you pick these guys and know their limitations. All right. As far as key action cards, I really only think there's one, which is Brilliant Administrator. He's going to be able to build some units, and this can potentially be a starting card. So, like, how awesome is it to place him either in Corellia, Mon Calamari, Utapau, and just immediately put a... well, I guess you couldn't start him off in Mon Cal or Utapau because it has to be an Imperial system. But if you start with Corellia, getting to throw a Star Destroyer up in the build queue right away, I mean, that's pretty great. So, key card here. Get more of that. Again, it's all about getting that plastic on the table and start sweeping. That's more or less my thoughts on the Seek and Destroy strategy. Let's kind of pivot over here to Capture and Torture. See if I can get some good cards in the shot there. All right. So, starting from the top, the pros of this strategy is that your actions don't have to be as effective. You could translate that into, you can maybe make a mistake or two and it's not going to hurt your chances of winning too much. But of course you can't, it's not a free pass to make a bunch of mistakes, but I think that this is a little more forgiving than the Seek and Destroy. Another great part about this strategy is that it's going to build a leader advantage. And what do I mean by a leader advantage is simply you have more leaders than your opponent, okay? And this is going to happen because you're going to capture one, maybe freeze one in Carbonite, Lure of the Dark Side to steal a leader. So you'll basically get that action economy going, which is one of the reasons why this is a little more forgiving. The more leaders you have, the more actions you're taking, the more you can recover from a blunder. The downside of this strategy, though, is that it's very card draw dependent. Like, if you don't see one of these cards in your opening hand, I mean, obviously minus Captured Leader and Gather Intel as their starting cards. But if you don't have at least one of these in your starting hand, like, you may not be able to go heavy on this strategy. And then the other downside to this is a lot of these actions are attempts, which means that they can be blocked. Unlike the Seek and Destroy, where almost all of those were just resolve in systems. So those are your pros and cons. Let's take a look at some of the key mission cards in this strategy. You have Capture Rebel Operative. This is just your basic plain Jane capture a rebel leader. All right. I don't know that much needs to be explained. Carbon freeze is very critical. Not only does it allow you to have a second captive. So if you capture someone, freeze them in carbonite, that captured ring is left free for you to go capture someone else, and that'll give you a 2-liter advantage, which is pretty great. And as a bonus, icing on the cake, rebels lose a reputation, so you get to get an extra round if you get carbon freeze to go off. Collect bounty. It's another capture card. If you have Boba Fett, it's worth +2. Having 3 spec ops means that you're already going to be rolling pretty good if someone goes to oppose it. And then I don't know how much this matters, but you get to take the captive leader and bring him back to a system with more Imperials. So that might make it a little harder for them to be rescued. I don't know. I haven't seen that ability be all that special. It's just, I don't know, kind of icing on the cake, like I said. Gather intel. This card is mostly going to be used if someone is loading up the rebel base with tons of units. Okay, if they just start dropping units in there every turn, what this does is you get to draw 1 probe card for every 4 units at the rebel base. So that way, by depleting the draw deck, you're going to give the rebels less options when they go to move their deck, and you're going to be able to process of elimination find the base a lot faster. So a lot of these cards basically fall into 3 categories. You just have your cards that kind of capture, you have your cards that mill the probe deck, and then you have some that kind of give you intelligence as you go along. I don't know why I pointed the super laser. That doesn't give you much intelligence. See, where were we? Talking about gather intel. This is going to help you mill the deck. Homing beacon is a fantastic card. You set a rebel leader free, and then they have to place the leader in the region with the base. See, what does long range probe do? Okay, so this is basically like a free shot at finding the rebel base. Lure of the Dark Side. This will give you a 2-liter swing if you get this to go off, because the rebels are going to lose a leader and you're going to gain a leader. And it's going to free up your captive ring or your carbon ring if it's on there. The way you want to use this card, if at all possible, send the Emperor out to use it, because you're going to start with +2 successes. But keep in mind that this card, for when someone opposes it, you count every single icon in that system when doing it. So that means, what does that mean? So let's say you have the Emperor doing the mission, and you send Boba Fett to co-do the mission with you. It means all of these skills are going to be added up for your dice. So you're going to roll 10 dice here, okay? And the rebel opponent is going to be able to do that too. And then again, do it with the Emperor, because you're going to start with those +2 successes. All right, so this is like a do or die card, and you only get 1 shot at it. So try to get it the full 10 dice when trying to convert someone. Transmission intercepted. Again, this is just there to mill out the probe deck. This is probably the weakest of the key missions. Interrogation droid is fantastic. Probably the best card in this strategy. Excuse me. If this is successful, the opponent has to name 3 systems, and one of them has to be it. So with the homing beacon, you're going to narrow it down to a 1 in 4. You're going to narrow it down to 1 in 4 planets. With interrogation droid, you're going to narrow it down to 1 in 3. So you're going to go from knowing where it is with 25% accuracy to 33% accuracy. Absolutely fantastic card. Probe Droid Initiative, I think, is a great card. This card alone is worth getting Ozzel. this is going to get you, if you do it with Oswald, it's going to get you 4 probe cards right off. All right, so just narrowing down that deck, narrowing it down by process of elimination is going to be great. And then for projects, key project, just Super Laser Online. And again, for the exact reasons why I discussed it over here in Seek and Destroy, is it's just there to when you find that rebel base and it's super fortified, and maybe because you did a bunch of these actions, you don't have as much plastic as you think you need. So that's what that's for. All right, so what are some key leaders to this strategy? I would say your most important guy is right here, Colonel Yularen. Those three intelligence skills, and then drawing 2 cards in any theater. I mean, this guy is great for this strategy. And then when you team that up with his interrogation droid being one of the best cards in this strategy, he's a no-brainer pick if you're doing capture torture. Unlike the Seek and Destroy, Boba Fett is actually really good. Or sorry, that's Vader. Boba Fett's really good for this strategy because he's great at the capture rebel. He has his own collect bounty. He could be used for by himself for carbon freeze. He has 5 skills for doing Lure of the Dark Side. So he makes up for not being able to command fleets. And in a way, he's really good because you can send him off on this and not have to worry about missing a chance to move fleets, or I guess the technical word is activate systems, but you get the idea. And then this is kind of an honorable mention, but Admiral Piet, because he has the 2 intel and then the 3 cards in space. So he's pretty decent. He also allows you to get the 2 successes on long range probe. So yeah, he gets an honorable mention. He wouldn't be my first choice in this strategy, but he's decent. And then again, Vader and Emperor are going to be key to this. Emperor for Lure of the Dark Side. But when I was thinking about critical leaders, I was mostly trying to focus on the ones you recruit, not the ones that you just start with. All right, and then the key actions for this strategy is right here. Local rumors, which not only let you recruit Colonel Yularen, who's the best leader for this strategy, but how cool is it that you just get to place this leader in any system with an Imperial unit, and the player just has to say whether the base is in that region or not. So it's like an unblockable homing beacon in some respects. So great card for this strategy. All right, so I've kind of gone through the key points to an Imperial strategy, or 2 main Imperial strategies. Let me recenter the tripod here. Let me zoom out. So now what I'm going to talk about are just some, what I'm going to call general pointers. I think this will probably be good enough. All right, so before I go into this, I need to kind of clear off the board here. So again, these are just key things to think about in general that they don't really apply to either strategy, but they're important to know and to keep in mind as you're playing. All right. So my first key point is that you want to think about board control, okay? Think about your terrain and where you're going to position your units so that way they can search a lot and they can be reactive. So once you find the base, you can get there in the shortest amount of time. So one thing I like to focus on is I want to capture as soon as possible Mandalore and Naboo. Insert your Jar Jar jokes here. Now, why do I like these 2 systems? Well, every place on the board except Elam, or no, sorry, except for Nal Hutta, Hoth, and Endor are within 2 sectors of either one of these planets. And I'm demonstrating that by placing glass beads in every system that is 2 away from Mandalore, and that's represented with these red beads. And then with these blue beads, I'm going to show everything that's within 2 of Naboo. And you're going to have some overlap here, obviously. I like to think of this in chess. One of the predominant ideas is that you want to control the center of the board. And I feel that that's what Mandalore and Naboo let you do. They let you control the board, because if you can deploy to these, you're within 2 turns of anything. All right, and I feel that being within 2 turns is a reasonable distance to be from everything. All right, and then let me kind of, in case it's not obvious, and then over here, sorry for the glare, but Endor and Hoth are not 2 away from this. Which kind of makes stuff like Homing Beacon really good, or Yularen's special card, Local Rumors. So that's one thing I like to keep in mind when I'm doing this. I feel controlling Mandalore and Naboo are the 2 most tactical spaces on the board. Moving on to the next little pro tip. Even though this sucks and I hate it, you need to take the time to search these remote planets, okay? I know it's not sexy because you really want to get to some of these places with production, especially if you're doing the seek and destroy kind of strategy, but more often than not, people choose remote planets to be the rebel base. Now, I don't know what the psychology behind that is. Maybe because Imperials naturally don't want to search it because of the lack of production. That could be a reason why. But more often than not, these are not searched. And what's interesting is Fantasy Flight Games did a, what do they call it, a week 1 release event where they just invited people to their store. Where's that at? In Minnesota. And they played a bunch of games of Rebellion, and they collected the data. And the top 3 base locations were Dantooine, Tatooine, and Elam. All of those were rebel bases. Or sorry, those were the top. Or all those top 3 bases are remote bases. Sorry about that. And then Ryloth was the most chosen populous planet, and that's because it's so far away from a lot of what's going on. But again, I printed out this chart with my notes, and you can kind of see what the breakdown is on most popular bases. All right, and you'll notice that a bunch of those are remote planets. And I also think it's interesting that Nal Hutta, Hoth, and Endor, the 3 planets that are not accessible within 2 spaces of Naboo and Mandalore, it's interesting that they were chosen a lot. Nal Hutta is understandable because it's way out of the way. And then you saw my video, most of y'all probably saw my video on the Endor corridor strategy that I used against my neighbor. But yeah, so do with it what you want with those. Maybe some of these planets, maybe you can think of it like how the hackers have a bunch of passwords that they always try first before doing anything else because they're so common that it's easy to get lucky. All right, moving on to the next tip. Just let me reiterate that research and development only works on Imperial loyal systems. So those key planets like Mon Calamari, Corellia, Utapau, Ord Mantell, you need to get them Imperial loyal so that you're more resilient to sabotage. Um, this is just being aware of what cards the rebels could and couldn't have, but don't let the rebels get all the systems in all the systems in a region rebel loyal, because there's a card that they can gain a reputation off of. Um, try to keep them to no more than 5 rebel loyal systems in general, because they have a card that, once again, if they have 6 loyal systems, they get a reputation. I think they also have another one. If they have 5 with either a unit or rebel loyalty, they get one. I'd have to check the exact wording, but you really want to hold them to 4, no more than 5, if at all possible. Let me reiterate this again. The Death Star is a huge, 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 huge liability. All right? Now, let me tell you why it's a huge liability. For one, Death Star plans. Okay? You need to be afraid of this card. All right? It's worth 2 reputation, and especially if your opponent recruits Luke or Wedge, just assume they have 1 in a million, in which case it's almost a sure thing for them to just gain 2 reputation. All right? Another reason it's a liability is because of this. Let me see if this will get into focus. Inspire sympathy. If you go around blowing up planets willy-nilly and you destroy 3 planets, this is worth 3 reputation. So just don't even use the Death Star to blow up planets until you found the base. All right? It's also hard to protect the Death Star. As soon as the objective deck shows level 2 cards, start putting 8 TIE fighters with your Death Star at all times. Okay? Once this deck gets to level 2 cards, your Death Star is a ticking time bomb. Okay? And for sure, don't construct another one. Unless you're just wanting to play this just for the absolute fun of it and it's not a competitive game. Like, I just can't think of a scenario why a second Death Star is good. Gun to my head, I was forced to come up with a situation on why it's good, is maybe the rebel base is fortified and you found it and it's on the other side of the board. But even in that situation, it's going to take 3 turns to get it built. So, I don't know. I just can't think of too many compelling reasons why it's good to build a second Death Star. File this one under knowing the objective deck. It's okay to let some infiltration missions go when the deck is showing 1s. But once they get to level 2 objectives, it's time to start attempting to block it. Because when they get into level 2, that's when they start getting nasty. Because the Death Star plans, Heart of the Empire, Return of the Jedi, and Inspire Sympathy. Those are some of the best cards or best objectives in the game, because they do, 2 points of reputation on average. Obviously, Inspire Sympathy can be curbed by just not blowing crap up. I think the only other thing that I have to say with this strategy guide is it never hurts to know the cards, okay? If you really want to play this at a competitive level, not that I'm some be-all, end-all competitor, but if you want to be competitive, you really need to know the cards. Know what the rebels are going to be able to hit you with. Know the ratios of the cards. For example, there's 1 planetary conquest, and there's 3 super lasers. Just having information like that is critical. And there's 2. Where's the card I'm looking for? Looking for address delays. But anyway, yeah, address delay. There's 2 of these in the deck. So knowing your cards, knowing your opponent's cards, that never hurts. I don't know too much else to say about this. I really hope this is what the viewer was looking for. I tried to make this as comprehensive as possible. If any of you all have requests that you want to make for specific games, I'll do my best to honor them. Just let me know in the comments or hit me up with an email. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. And I already know this is coming, so I will work on a Rebel strategy guide as my next video in the future. All right, thanks a lot for your time.